She was ruined the moment his name touched hers, but what happened on their wedding night changed everything. Welcome to a story of survival, power, and the quiet defiance that shatters empires. If you're here for scandal, strategy, and a woman who refuses to break, you're in the right place. Stay until the end to see how a governess with nothing defeats those who have everything. Don't forget to like, comment with the city you're watching from, and let's dive into a world where reputation is currency and one wrong move means destruction. The parlor smelled like old roses and judgment. Clara Whitfield sat with her spine straight, hands folded in her lap, while three women dissected her life across a tea table that might as well have been a guillotine. Lady Pemberton, Mrs. Harwick, the Dowager Countess of something or other whose name Clara had stopped bothering to remember. They all blurred together after a while, the same pale powder, the same calculated smiles, the same venom dressed up as concern. Such a shame, Lady Pemberton murmured, her voice dripping false sympathy. A governess of your standing, Miss Whitfield. And now this association. Clara didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness to women like these was the same as bleeding in shark-infested water. There is no association, Clara said evenly. The Duke and I were merely seen together, Mrs. Harwick cut in, her smile sharp as a blade. Twice. At the opera. And then again at Lord Ashford's garden party, where you were observed speaking privately for nearly 20 minutes. Alone, the Dowager added, savoring the word like it was made of sugar. Clara's jaw tightened. She wanted to ask what they expected her to do when the Duke of Blackmore approached her. Ignore him? Run? She was a governess, not a countess. When a man of his rank spoke, you answered. That was survival. But they didn't care about logic. They cared about blood in the water. My reputation is intact, Clara said quietly. I have done nothing improper. Lady Pemberton set down her teacup with a delicate clink. My dear girl, propriety is not about what you've done. It's about what people believe you've done. And right now, half of London believes the Duke of Blackmore has taken a particular interest in you. The word particular hung in the air like smoke. Clara felt the walls closing in. She'd built her entire life on one foundation, her reputation. It was all she had. No title, no family wealth, no connections. Just her name, her work, and the trust of the families who hired her to raise their children. If that crumbled, she had nothing. Less than nothing. She'd be cast out, unemployable, forgotten. I assure you, Clara said, and hated how thin her voice sounded, there is no truth to these rumors. Then you should speak to the Duke, Mrs. Harwick said lightly. Have him issue a public denial. Surely, if there's nothing between you, he wouldn't object. It was a trap. Clara saw it immediately. If she approached Rowan Blackmore and asked him to deny the rumors, she'd look desperate, guilty. And if he refused, or worse, if he laughed at her, it would confirm everything. But if she did nothing, the whispers would grow until they devoured her whole. I will consider it, Clara said, rising to her feet, if you'll excuse me. She didn't wait for permission. She walked out of that parlor with her head high and her hands steady, even though her heart was hammering against her ribs like it wanted to escape. The street outside was gray and cold, the kind of London afternoon that pressed down on your shoulders like wet wool. Clara pulled her shawl tighter and started walking. She had nowhere to go. Her current employer, a minor baronet's wife, had already given her a pointed look that morning and suggested Clara might want to seek new opportunities. The translation, pack your things. Clara had 2 weeks, maybe less. She turned the corner and nearly collided with a man in a black coat. Miss Whitfield. Her stomach dropped. Rowan Blackmore stood in front of her, tall and unreadable, his dark eyes fixed on her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. He was older than her, maybe 15 years, but age hadn't softened him. If anything, it had sharpened him, all edges and silence and a kind of coldness that made people step back without knowing why. Your Grace, Clara said, dipping into a curtsy that felt like surrender. We need to speak. It wasn't a question. Clara glanced around. The street was empty, but that didn't matter. If anyone saw them, if anyone even suspected, they'd add it to the pile of evidence burying her alive. I don't think that's wise, she said carefully. Neither do I. His voice was flat, matter of fact. But wisdom isn't going to fix this. There's nothing to fix. Don't lie to me, Miss Whitfield. You're smarter than that. The directness of it startled her. Most men of his rank hid behind pleasantries and insinuation. Rowan Blackmore didn't bother. Walk with me, he said, and started moving before she could refuse. Clara hesitated. Then she followed, because what choice did she have? They walked in silence for half a block before he spoke again. I'm aware of the rumors, he said, and I'm aware of what they're doing to you. Clara's throat tightened. Then perhaps your Grace could issue a statement. Make it clear that there's nothing between us. I could. He didn't look at her. But it wouldn't matter. They've already decided you're guilty. A denial would only make it worse. Then what do you suggest? He stopped walking, turned to face her, and for the first time Clara saw something crack in that cold exterior, something that looked almost like regret. Marry me. The world tilted. Clara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me, he repeated, as calm as if he were ordering tea. It's the only way to stop this. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, Miss Whitfield. Her mind raced. This was insane. Dukes didn't marry governesses. They didn't marry anyone without titles, land, connections. And Rowan Blackmore, the man half of London feared and the other half avoided, certainly didn't marry out of charity. Why? She demanded. Why would you do this? Because it's efficient. His jaw tightened. You need protection. I need the rumors to stop. My daughters need stability, not scandal. This solves all of it. Efficiently? Yes. Clara felt something cold and sharp twist in her chest. Of course, this wasn't kindness. It wasn't even pity. It was strategy. She was a problem, and he was solving her. And what do I get? She asked quietly. Safety, security, a title. My name. He paused. Freedom from this. He gestured vaguely at the world around them, the streets, the whispers, the women who'd just carved her to pieces over tea. Clara wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she didn't need saving, that she could fix this herself. But the truth was standing right in front of her, cold and undeniable. She couldn't. She was drowning, and he was offering her a rope, even if that rope had thorns. What about love? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Rowan's expression didn't change. Love is a luxury neither of us can afford. There it was, the truth, stripped bare. Clara looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion behind the coldness, the way his shoulders carried weight that had nothing to do with his title. He wasn't rescuing her, he was managing a crisis, and she was just another piece on the board. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow. He stepped back, already turning away. After that, the offer expires. He walked off without another word, leaving Clara standing alone in the street with a decision that would either save her or destroy her. The walk back to her lodgings felt like wading through fog. Clara's mind wouldn't settle. Every step brought a new argument, a new fear, a new reason to say yes or no, or run in the opposite direction entirely. Marry a duke, become someone, have protection, a home, security. Or marry a stranger, live in a cage, spend the rest of her life pretending. By the time she reached the narrow townhouse where she rented a small room on the third floor, her head was pounding. The landlady, a pinch-faced woman named Mrs. Graves, was waiting in the hall. A visitor for you, Miss Whitfield, she said, her tone suggesting visitors were both scandalous and inconvenient. Upstairs. I told her you weren't receiving, but she insisted. Clara's stomach sank. Who? Wouldn't give a name, but she's quality, that one. You can tell by the way she looks at things. Mrs. Graves sniffed. Like she's pricing them for auction. Clara climbed the stairs slowly, dread building with each step. When she opened the door to her small room, she found a woman standing by the window, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light. The Dowager Duchess, Rowan's mother. Miss Whitfield, the Dowager said, turning. She was older than Clara expected, 60, maybe more, but age had only refined her into something sharper. Her black dress was severe, her posture military, her eyes the same dark, unreadable color as her son's. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Your Grace. Clara dipped into a curtsy, mind racing. Of course not. Liar. The dowager's mouth twitched. But a polite one. Sit down, girl. We need to talk. Clara sat. The dowager remained standing, surveying the room with the same pricing look Mrs. Graves had mentioned. Clara saw her own life through those eyes, the narrow bed, the single chair, the washstand in the corner. Everything she owned fit in a trunk at the foot of the bed. My son has made you an offer, the dowager said. He has. And you're considering it. I am. The dowager's eyes narrowed. Do you love him? No. Good. Love makes fools of women. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something sharper. Let me be clear, Miss Whitfield. If you accept this proposal, you will be walking into a nest of vipers. My son's family will not welcome you. Society will not forgive you. And Rowan himself, she paused. He is not an easy man. I'm aware. Are you? The dowager tilted her head. He's been broken before, by love, by loss. He won't let it happen again. If you marry him expecting warmth, you'll freeze to death waiting. Clara met her gaze. I don't expect warmth, Your Grace. I expect survival. Something flickered in the dowager's expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition. Then you might just make it, she said softly. But understand this. The moment you say yes, you become a target. Every enemy he has will come for you. Every weakness you show will be used against you. And if you fail, she let the sentence hang. If I fail, Clara finished, I'll be exactly where I am now, with nothing. The dowager smiled, thin and sharp. Precisely. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. One more thing, Miss Whitfield. Rowan may be cold, but he is not cruel. If you give him loyalty, he will give you protection. If you give him strength, he will give you respect. But if you give him betrayal, her eyes glinted. Well, you seem intelligent enough to know how that ends. And then she was gone, leaving Clara alone with a choice that felt heavier than ever. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window watching the street below, turning the decision over and over in her mind like a coin that wouldn't land. Outside, London moved through its rhythms, carriages rattling past, a drunk singing off-key, a cat yowling in the alley. Normal life, continuing while hers hung in the balance. She thought about her parents, dead now, both of them, gone before she turned 20. Her father had been a clerk, her mother a seamstress. Respectable, poor. They'd scraped together enough to give Clara an education, to make her something more than a factory girl or a maid, and she'd used it, become a governess, built a reputation, made herself useful to people who would never see her as an equal, and now those same people were destroying her. The irony wasn't lost on her. She thought about Rowan's daughters. 2 little girls who'd lost their mother and were about to gain a replacement whether they wanted one or not. What kind of life was that? What kind of stepmother would she be? A woman who didn't love their father, who'd married him to escape ruin? But then, what kind of life did they have now? A cold house, a distant father, servants who whispered and pitied them. Maybe she could help. Maybe she could make it better. Or maybe she'd just make it worse. By dawn, Clara had made her choice. She dressed carefully, brushed her hair until it shone, and walked to Blackmore House before she could change her mind. The butler who answered the door looked at her like she was a stray dog. I'm here to see the Duke, Clara said. His Grace is not receiving... Tell him Miss Whitfield is here. He'll see me. The butler's expression suggested otherwise, but he disappeared into the house. Clara stood in the entrance hall, surrounded by marble and portraits of dead Blackmores, and tried not to feel like she was signing her own death warrant. Rowan appeared 5 minutes later, still in his shirt sleeves, looking like he'd been working. His expression gave nothing away. Miss Whitfield. Your Grace. Clara took a breath. I've made my decision. Something shifted in his eyes. And? I'll marry you. The words hung between them. Rowan studied her for a long moment, as if looking for cracks, for doubt, for any sign she'd change her mind. Why? He asked finally. Clara almost laughed. You're the one who proposed. I know why I did. I want to know why you're accepting. She could lie. Give him some noble reason about protecting her reputation or wanting to help his daughters. But he'd see through it, and she was tired of pretending. Because I'm out of options, Clara said. Because society has already condemned me, and this is the only way to survive it. Because I'd rather be a duchess in a cold marriage than a governess with no future. She met his eyes. Is that honest enough for you? Rowan's mouth almost curved into a smile. Yes. Good. Then we understand each other. We do. He held out his hand. We'll marry in 3 days. Quietly. I'll handle the arrangements. Clara took his hand. His grip was firm, businesslike. A deal being sealed, not a romance beginning. 3 days, she echoed. Can you be ready? Clara thought about her tiny room, her single trunk, the life she was leaving behind. I don't have much to pack. Then it's settled. He released her hand, and Clara felt the weight of what she'd just done settle over her like a shroud. No going back now, no second chances. She was going to marry the Duke of Blackmore, and pray she survived it. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparations that felt more like a military operation than a wedding. Rowan's solicitor appeared with contracts. A modiste arrived with fabric samples and a measuring tape. The dowager sent a note with a single line. Don't embarrass us. Clara signed papers she barely read, stood still while strangers pinned and adjusted, and tried not to think too hard about what she was doing. On the second day, she went back to her lodgings to collect her things. Mrs. Graves met her at the door with a look that said she'd heard the news. Marrying a duke, Mrs. Graves said. Well, that's one way out, I suppose. Clara didn't respond. She climbed the stairs, packed her trunk, and looked around the small room one last time. It had been hers for 2 years. Not much, but hers. Safe. Simple. Now she was trading it for a mansion full of ghosts and enemies. She closed the door behind her and didn't look back. The wedding was small, cold, and efficient, just like Rowan had promised. No flowers, no music, no guests beyond the legal witnesses and his 2 daughters, who stood silent and wide-eyed in matching gray dresses. The ceremony took less than 20 minutes. The vicar spoke quickly, as if he wanted to be anywhere else. Rowan's voice was steady when he said his vows. Clara's was quieter, but she didn't stumble. When it was over, she was Clara Blackmore, Duchess, and completely, utterly alone. The carriage ride to Blackmore House was silent. Rowan sat across from her, staring out the window. His daughters, Lily, 8, and Grace, 6, sat beside him, stealing glances at Clara like she was a ghost. Clara didn't try to make conversation. She was too busy bracing herself for what came next. The house loomed ahead, massive and dark, all stone and iron, and centuries of cold aristocratic power. Clara had seen estates before, but nothing like this. Blackmore House didn't just sit on the land. It dominated it, swallowed it, made everything around it look small. Inside, the staff lined up in the entrance hall. Housekeeper, butler, maids, footmen. A small army of people who would now take orders from her. Except they didn't look at her like a duchess. They looked at her like an intruder. The housekeeper, Mrs. Connolly, stern and gray-haired, offered a curtsy so shallow it was almost an insult. Your Grace. Mrs. Connolly, Clara said evenly, I've prepared your rooms, separate from His Grace's, as requested. The words were like a slap. Separate rooms, of course. This wasn't a real marriage. It was a contract. Thank you, Clara said, keeping her voice level. Rowan dismissed the staff with a gesture, then turned to Clara. You'll want to rest, he said. Dinner is at 8. I'll introduce you to the girls properly then. Of course. He nodded once, then walked away, taking his daughters with him. Clara stood alone in the entrance hall, surrounded by marble and silence and the crushing weight of her new reality. She'd survived the wedding. Now came the harder part. The room they'd given her was larger than her entire lodging house had been. High ceilings, heavy curtains, furniture that probably cost more than she'd earned in 5 years. And it felt like a mausoleum. Clara sat on the edge of the massive bed and tried to breathe. A knock at the door. A maid entered, young, nervous, avoiding Clara's eyes. Your Grace, I'm Mary. I've been assigned to help you dress for dinner. Thank you, Mary. Clara stood. But I can manage. Mary looked horrified. Oh, no, Your Grace. Mrs. Connolly said I was to help you. She said, She said you might not know the proper way. Clara's jaw tightened. Another insult, wrapped in service. But arguing with a maid wouldn't help. Very well, Clara said. Thank you. Mary helped her into the evening gown, dark blue silk that felt like armor, and pinned up her hair. The girl worked quickly, efficiently, and said nothing unless directly asked. When she finished, Clara looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked like a duchess. She felt like an imposter. You look lovely, Your Grace, Mary said softly. Clara met her eyes in the mirror. Do you believe that? Mary flushed. I don't understand. Yes, you do. Clara turned to face her. The staff thinks I don't belong here. I can see it in every curtsy, every avoided glance. And you're wondering if they're right. Mary's face went pale. Your Grace, I would never— I'm not angry, Clara said. I just want you to know, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you think of me, whatever Mrs. Connolly has told you, I'm the Duchess now, and I intend to act like it. Mary nodded slowly. Yes, Your Grace. It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't dismissal either. Clara would take it. Dinner was a special kind of torture. Clara sat at the long dining table, Rowan at one end, her at the other, his daughters between them, like a demilitarized zone. The distance felt deliberate. The silence felt heavier. Lily picked at her food. Grace didn't eat at all. They're shy, Rowan said, not quite looking at Clara. They'll adjust. Clara doubted that. The girls didn't look shy. They looked haunted. How long has it been? Clara asked quietly. Since their mother. 3 years. It's been 3 years. Long enough for the wound to scar but not heal. What was she like? Rowan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. Vivian was everything I wasn't. Warm, open. The kind of person who made rooms brighter just by walking into them. Past tense. Everything past tense. The girls must miss her terribly, Clara said. They do. The silence stretched again, thick and suffocating. Clara looked at Lily and Grace, saw the way they huddled together, saw the fear in their eyes. They weren't afraid of her. They were afraid of losing again. Clara set down her fork. May I speak with them? Alone? Rowan hesitated, then nodded. After dinner, Clara followed the girls to the library, where they'd retreated like rabbits into a burrow. They sat together on a sofa, pressed close, watching her with identical wary eyes. Clara sat across from them. Didn't try to smile. Didn't try to charm. I know this is strange, she said. I know you didn't ask for me, and I know you miss your mother. Lily's jaw tightened. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I'm not here to replace her, Clara continued. I can't, but I am here. And I'm not going anywhere. So if you want to hate me, that's fine. If you want to ignore me, that's fine too. But if you ever need anything, anything at all, you can ask. Grace sniffled. Lily stared at her, calculating. Do you love our father? Lily asked suddenly. Clara didn't lie. No. Does he love you? No. Then why did you marry him? Clara met the girl's eyes. Because sometimes survival matters more than love. Lily considered this. Then, slowly, she nodded. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. Will you leave? Grace asked in a tiny voice. Like Mama did? Clara's heart broke a little. Your mama didn't leave you, sweetheart. She died. That's different. But you could still go. I could, Clara admitted. But I won't. I made a promise today, and I keep my promises. Grace looked at Lily. Some silent conversation passed between them. Then Grace scooted forward just slightly, closing the distance by inches. It was something. Clara stood. I'll let you get ready for bed, but my door is always open. Remember that. She left them there, 2 small figures in a room full of shadows, and hoped she hadn't just made another promise she couldn't keep. Later that night, Clara stood in her room, vast and cold and emptier than any space she'd ever occupied, and waited. She knew what came next. She'd heard the stories, the wedding night, the claiming, the moment when a husband asserted his rights and a wife became property. She didn't want it, but she'd accepted it when she said yes. She'd steeled herself for it. Footsteps in the hall. Clara's pulse spiked. Her hands went cold. The door opened. Rowan stood there, still dressed, still distant. He looked at her for a long moment, then he spoke. "I won't touch you." Clara blinked. "What?" "This marriage is legal, it's binding, but it doesn't require—" He trailed off, jaw tight. "You have your rooms, I have mine. That's how it will stay." She stared at him, uncomprehending. "Why?" "Because you didn't choose this," he said quietly. "Not really. And I won't take something you didn't offer." For the first time since she'd met him, Clara saw past the coldness, saw something human underneath, something decent. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. "We'll maintain appearances in public, but in private, you're free. Your time is yours. Your space is yours." He paused at the door. "I ask only for loyalty and discretion." "You'll have both." "Good." He started to leave, then stopped. "Clara?" She looked up. "You did well today," he said. "With the girls. They liked you." It was the first kind thing he'd said to her. The first sign that maybe, there was more to Rowan Blackmore than ice and strategy. "Thank you," Clara said again. He left, closing the door behind him. And Clara stood there, alone in the dark, feeling something crack open inside her chest. Not love, but the faint, fragile beginning of trust. She climbed into the massive bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling. She'd survived day one. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The morning after her wedding night, Clara woke to silence and the smell of rain. She dressed herself. No maid came, though she'd heard footsteps outside her door twice and whispers that stopped the moment she moved. When she finally emerged, the hallway was empty, but she could feel eyes on her from somewhere in the shadows of this massive, cold house. Downstairs, the breakfast room was set for one. Clara stared at the single place setting, the single cup, the single chair pulled out at the end of a table that could seat 20. A message, clear as day, "You don't belong here." She sat down anyway. The food was cold. The tea was bitter. And when Mrs. Connolly swept in to clear the dishes, she didn't meet Clara's eyes. "Where's His Grace?" Clara asked. "The Duke breakfasts in his study, Your Grace. He has since—" Mrs. Connolly caught herself. "For some time now." Since his first wife died, Clara finished silently, since the house became a mausoleum. "And the girls?" "In the nursery with Miss Holloway. Their governess. Clara's replacement, in a sense, or maybe her predecessor. She wasn't sure which was worse. "I'd like to meet Miss Holloway," Clara said. "This morning, if possible." Mrs. Connolly's mouth thinned. "I'll inform her, Your Grace." She left without another word, and Clara sat alone in the breakfast room, feeling the walls close in. This was her life now. A duchess in name, a ghost in practice. She'd survived worse. At least that's what she told herself. Miss Holloway was a brittle woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and a spine like a fireplace poker. She stood in the nursery doorway, blocking Clara's entry like a sentry. "Your Grace," she said, the title sounding like an accusation. "Miss Holloway." Clara kept her voice even. "I thought we should speak. About the girls." "The girls are my responsibility. They're my stepdaughters. In name only." The words hung between them, sharp and deliberate. Clara felt her jaw tighten. She wanted to push past this woman, to assert her authority as duchess, as their father's wife. But she'd learned long ago that authority without respect was just noise. "I'm not here to replace you," Clara said carefully. "But I am here, and I'd like to be part of their lives." Miss Holloway's eyes narrowed. The last thing those girls need is another woman parading through their lives, pretending to care, only to disappear when it suits her. "I'm not going anywhere." "So you say." Miss Holloway stepped back, just enough to let Clara see into the room. Lily and Grace sat at a small table, bent over their lessons, shoulders hunched like they were bracing for impact. "But women like you always do." Clara's temper flared. "Women like me?" "Opportunists, social climbers, governesses who marry above their station and think a title makes them something they're not." The contempt in her voice was like acid. Clara felt it burn, felt the old shame rise up, the shame of being poor, of being nobody, of reaching for something she had no right to touch. But she'd married Rowan Blackmore. She'd earned this title, even if it came with a price. "I understand your concern," Clara said, voice cold now, "but I am the Duchess of Blackmore. Those girls are my responsibility as much as yours. And if you have a problem with that, you're welcome to discuss it with the Duke." Miss Holloway's face went white, then red. She opened her mouth, probably to say something cutting, but Clara didn't wait. She walked past her into the nursery and knelt beside Grace's chair. "Good morning," Clara said softly. Grace looked up, eyes wide and uncertain. "Good morning, Your Grace." "You can call me Clara, if you want." Grace glanced at Lily, who was watching with that same calculating stare from last night. After a long moment, Lily spoke. "Miss Holloway says we should call you Duchess." "Miss Holloway is welcome to her opinion," Clara said, "but you're welcome to yours too." Lily blinked, surprised. Then, slowly, something that might have been the beginning of a smile crossed her face. Behind them, Miss Holloway made a small, furious sound and swept out of the room. Clara knew she'd just made an enemy, but she'd also made a choice. And in this house, that was all she had. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of awkward conversations and careful navigation. Clara tried to establish some kind of routine, some sense of normalcy, but everything felt wrong. The servants moved around her like she was a piece of furniture they were trying not to bump into. The house itself seemed to reject her presence. Doors stuck, floorboards creaked accusations. The very air felt heavy with judgment. By noon, Clara's head was pounding. She retreated to the library, seeking refuge in the one place that felt neutral. Books didn't care if you were born a governess or a duchess. They just sat there, waiting. She was running her fingers along the spines when she heard voices in the hall. "It's disgraceful, that's what it is." A woman's voice, sharp and carrying. "Marrying a governess." As if the Blackmore name wasn't already suffering. "She's pretty enough, I suppose." A man this time, bored. In a plain sort of way, pretty doesn't make you a duchess. Breeding does, and that girl has none. Clara's hand stilled on the shelf. She should leave, should make her presence known, but something kept her frozen, listening. "Give her a month," the woman continued. "She'll be gone by spring. Either she'll run, or Rowan will tire of the charade and send her packing. Men like him don't keep charity cases." "What about the cousin? Victor?" "Oh, he's furious, absolutely livid. He was this close to the title and now Rowan's gone and married. If she gives him a son, she won't. Look at her, barely more than a child herself." Their laughter echoed down the hall, cruel and casual. Clara stood there, hands trembling, rage and humiliation warring in her chest. She wanted to storm out there, to confront them, to prove she was more than they thought. But she didn't. Because they were right about one thing. She had no power here. Not yet. Instead, she walked to Rowan's study and knocked. "Enter." He was at his desk, surrounded by papers, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression. "Clara, is something wrong?" "I need your help," she said. He set down his pen. "With what?" "I need to understand this house, the finances, the staff, the estates." She moved closer, kept her voice steady. "I need to know how everything works. Because right now, I'm useless. And useless people don't survive here." Rowan studied her for a long moment. "You're asking me to teach you." "I'm asking you to give me the tools to be your wife. Your real wife. Not just a name on a marriage certificate." He leaned back in his chair. "Why?" "Because I overheard two of your relatives laughing about how quickly I'll be gone. Because your staff treats me like an intruder. Because your cousin is waiting for me to fail." Clara's hands clenched. "And because I refuse to give any of them the satisfaction." Something almost like approval flickered across Rowan's face. "Sit down." She did. For the next 2 hours, Rowan walked her through the basics. The household accounts, the staff hierarchy, the various properties and their managers, the social obligations and political alliances that came with the title. It was overwhelming, a crash course in aristocracy delivered with Rowan's typical efficiency. But Clara absorbed every word. "The most important thing," Rowan said finally, "is to never show weakness. These people are predators. They can smell fear." "Like you?" Clara asked before she could stop herself. His mouth twitched. Especially like me. Then teach me to be a predator too. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a ledger and slid it across the desk. The household accounts. Mrs. Connolly manages them, but I want you to review them. Every entry, every expense. Look for inconsistencies. Clara opened the book, scanned the columns of numbers. You think she's stealing? I think someone is. And I think finding out who will give you leverage. It was a test. Clara knew that. A way to see if she was serious, if she had the spine for this. She met his eyes. When do you need my report? 3 days. Clara nodded and left with the ledger tucked under her arm, feeling the weight of it like a weapon. The first social event came faster than Clara expected. A dinner party. Hosted by Lady Ashford, one of the most powerful women in their circle. An invitation to the new Duchess of Blackmore and her husband. A chance to be seen, to be judged, to be weighed and measured by the people who mattered. Clara knew it was a trap. She went anyway. Rowan said nothing about it until the night of the dinner, when he appeared at her door in full evening dress, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. You don't have to do this, he said. Clara adjusted her gloves. She'd chosen her gown carefully. Dark green silk, elegant but not showy, expensive but not flashy. A statement of quiet confidence. Yes, I do. They'll tear you apart. I know. He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. Then he offered his arm. Then let's give them something to talk about. The carriage ride was tense. Clara sat across from Rowan, watching the streets blur past, trying to steady her breathing. She'd been to events like this before, as a governess, as a shadow, as someone who served tea and disappeared. But now she was the center of attention. Now she was the scandal. Don't let them bait you, Rowan said quietly. They'll ask questions designed to make you stumble. Just smile, say nothing of substance, and let me handle it. I'm not a child. I didn't say you were. His jaw tightened. But this is a different kind of battle, Clara, and you don't have armor yet. She wanted to argue, but he was right. She didn't know the rules of this world, didn't know how to navigate the subtle cruelties and coded insults. She was walking into enemy territory unarmed, but she was walking in. Lady Ashford's house was everything Blackmore House wasn't. Bright, warm, dripping with gold and crystal, and the kind of effortless wealth that came from generations of never wanting for anything. Clara felt underdressed the moment she stepped inside, even though her gown was new, expensive, chosen by Rowan's tailor to fit the role. She still felt like a fraud. The drawing room fell silent when they entered. Not completely. People kept talking, kept moving, kept pretending they weren't staring, but Clara could feel it, the shift, the focus, the weight of 100 eyes dissecting her from across the room. Lady Ashford glided over, all smiles and venom. Your Grace, how lovely to see you. Lady Ashford, Clara said, dipping into a curtsy that felt like surrender. And the Duke, of course. Lady Ashford's smile sharpened. Such a surprise, your marriage. So sudden, so unexpected. Love rarely follows a schedule, Rowan said flatly. Clara's stomach twisted. Love. The lie they were supposed to sell. She kept her expression neutral, but she could see the disbelief in Lady Ashford's eyes. How charming, Lady Ashford murmured. Do come in. Everyone is simply dying to meet the new Duchess. Dying. The word choice felt deliberate. The evening was a gauntlet. Clara was introduced to a parade of titled strangers who smiled with their mouths and sneered with their eyes. Questions came like daggers. How did you and the Duke meet? Where's your family from? You were a governess, weren't you? How fascinating. Every question was a trap. Every answer would be dissected later, twisted, used against her. Clara kept her responses short, polite, revealing nothing. But she could feel herself sweating beneath the silk of her gown, could feel the walls closing in. And then Victor Blackmore arrived. Clara had heard of him but never met him. Rowan's cousin. Heir presumptive, since Rowan only had daughters. Tall, handsome in a way that felt calculated, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He crossed the room like he owned it, nodded to Rowan, and turned his full attention to Clara. So you're the governess who caught my cousin's eye, Victor said, voice smooth as oil. I'm the Duchess of Blackmore. Clara corrected. Of course. My apologies. He didn't sound apologetic. It's just so unusual, isn't it? A man like Rowan, marrying so quickly, after so many years alone. One might wonder what prompted such a sudden decision. Clara felt Rowan tense beside her, but she answered before he could. Perhaps he was tired of being alone. Victor's smile widened. Perhaps. Or perhaps he was simply cornered. The room seemed to hold its breath. Clara kept her voice steady. I'm not sure I understand your meaning. Don't you? Victor's eyes glinted. A scandal. A ruined reputation. A marriage that conveniently saves face for both parties. It's almost transactional. The word hung in the air like smoke. Rowan's hand found Clara's elbow, fingers tightening. Victor, we're leaving. So soon? But the evening has barely started. Now. Rowan steered Clara toward the door. She kept her head high, her expression blank, even though her heart was pounding and her hands were shaking. Behind them, she heard the whispers start, a soft, vicious hiss that followed them all the way to the carriage. When the door closed behind them, Rowan let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for hours. That, he said quietly, was exactly what I expected. Clara stared at him. He's going to destroy us. He's going to try. Why does he hate you so much? Rowan was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, voice flat. Because if I die without a male heir, he inherits everything. The title, the land, the fortune. And right now, with only daughters, I'm one accident away from making him a very rich man. Clara's blood went cold. He wants you dead. No, he wants me discredited, removed, proven unfit. Murder is too risky. Rowan's jaw tightened. But a scandal? A marriage exposed as a sham? That's enough to ruin a man's reputation, and a ruined reputation is as good as death in our world. Then why did you marry me? Clara demanded. Why give him ammunition? Because doing nothing was worse. Rowan met her eyes. Victor was already spreading rumors about me, about my state of mind, about my fitness as a father. The whispers about you gave me an opportunity to act, to show strength, to silence the questions by giving them an answer they couldn't argue with. So I'm a shield. Yes. At least he was honest. Clara leaned back against the seat, exhausted. This is going to get worse, isn't it? Much worse. And you think I can survive it? Rowan looked at her for a long moment. I think you're stronger than you know, Clara. And I think if anyone can weather this storm, it's you. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't even kindness. But it was something. And right now, Clara would take it. The next morning, the servants were worse. Clara came down to find her breakfast setting moved to the far end of the table, away from the window, in the coldest corner of the room. Small, petty, deliberate. When she asked for tea, the maid brought coffee. When she requested her correspondence, it was delivered 2 hours late. Death by 1,000 cuts. Clara said nothing, but she noticed. And that afternoon, when Mrs. Connolly came to discuss the week's menus, Clara made her first move. I'd like to review the household accounts, Clara said. Mrs. Connolly's face went still. The accounts, Your Grace? Yes, all of them. Kitchen expenses, staff wages, maintenance costs. I'd like them on my desk by tomorrow morning. That's highly irregular. The Duke has always... The Duke is not the Duchess, Clara said quietly. And the household is my responsibility now. So unless you'd like to explain to His Grace why you're refusing a direct order from his wife, I suggest you comply. Mrs. Connolly's mouth thinned into a bloodless line, but she nodded. As you wish, Your Grace. When she left, Clara felt a small, sharp thrill of victory. It wouldn't last, but it was a start. That night, Clara sat in the library going through the household ledgers by candlelight. Numbers swam before her eyes, expenses, receipts, payments to vendors she'd never heard of. But slowly a pattern emerged. Money was disappearing. Not a lot. Just enough to be hidden in the chaos of running a house this size. A few extra pounds here, an inflated invoice there. Over months, maybe years, it added up. Someone was stealing from the Blackmore estate. Clara's heart raced. This was power. Real power. If she could prove it, if she could find the source, she could break the staff's resistance. Show them she wasn't just a pretty face in a borrowed title. She was still hunting through the records when the door opened. Rowan stood there, still dressed from dinner, looking exhausted. "You're up late," he said. "So are you." He crossed the room, glanced at the papers spread across the desk. "What are you looking for?" Clara hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Theft." His eyebrows rose. "Explain." She showed him the discrepancies. The pattern. The missing funds. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're right," he said finally. "You knew?" "I suspected, but I didn't have proof, and I didn't have time to investigate." He met her eyes. "You do." Clara felt something shift between them. Not warmth, not quite trust, but acknowledgement. He was giving her room to act, to prove herself. "If you find the source," Rowan said, "you'll make enemies." "I already have enemies." "More enemies." Clara smiled, thin and sharp. "Good. Let them come." It took 3 days to trace the theft to its source. A footman named Thomas, young, handsome, and apparently very good at skimming funds from vendor payments, pocketing the difference, and covering his tracks. Clara confronted him in the servants' hall, in front of the entire staff. "Thomas," she said, voice calm and cold, "I'd like to discuss the payment you received from the butcher last month, the one that was £50 more than the actual invoice." The color drained from his face. Around them, the other servants went still. "I don't know what you're talking about, Your Grace." Clara held up the ledger. "The records say otherwise, as do the receipts I obtained directly from the vendor." She paused. "You have 2 choices. Confess, return what you've stolen, and accept immediate dismissal, or deny it, and I'll bring charges." Thomas stared at her, mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then Mrs. Connolly stepped forward. "Your Grace, perhaps this is a misunderstanding." "It's not." Clara didn't look away from Thomas. "Choose." The silence stretched. Then Thomas crumpled. "I'll confess," he whispered. Clara nodded. "Pack your things. You're dismissed." He fled, and the rest of the staff stared at Clara like she'd grown a second head. Mrs. Connolly's face was white with fury, but she said nothing. Clara met her eyes. "If there are any other discrepancies in the household accounts, I expect them corrected immediately. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal, Your Grace." "Good." Clara left the servants' hall with her head high and her hands steady, even though her heart was hammering. She'd just fired a man, humiliated him in front of his peers, made an example of him. It was brutal. It was necessary. And it was just the beginning. That evening, she found Lily and Grace waiting outside her door. "You fired Thomas," Lily said. "I did." "Why?" "Because he was stealing." Lily considered this. "Miss Holloway says you're being cruel, that you're trying to control everyone." Clara knelt down, met the girl's eyes. "Do you think I'm being cruel?" Lily hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I think you're being strong." "Good." Clara stood. "Because in this house, strength is the only thing that matters." Grace tugged on her sister's sleeve. "I like her." Lily smiled. A real smile, the first Clara had seen. "Me too." It was a small victory, a fragile one, but in a house full of enemies, Clara would take every ally she could get. The letter arrived 3 days later. An invitation. From Victor Blackmore. To a gathering at his estate. A celebration, he called it, though the word felt poisoned. In honor of his cousin's unexpected marriage. A chance for society to properly welcome the new Duchess. Clara read it twice, feeling her stomach turn. "It's a trap," she said. Rowan stood by the window of his study, staring out at the rain-soaked gardens. He'd barely glanced at the invitation when she'd brought it to him. "Of course it is," he said. "Then we refuse." "We can't." Clara's jaw tightened. "Why not?" "Because refusing makes us look weak, like we're hiding, like we're afraid." He turned to face her. "Victor wants us isolated. He wants people to wonder why we won't show our faces, why we're avoiding society. And the more we hide, the more they'll believe his lies. So we walk into his trap and hope we survive it." "Yes." Clara wanted to throw the invitation in the fire, wanted to tell Rowan this was insane, that they were giving Victor exactly what he wanted, But she knew he was right. Hiding would only make things worse. "When is it?" she asked. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to steel herself for whatever Victor had planned. 2 weeks to figure out how to survive. "I'll need a new gown," Clara said quietly. Rowan almost smiled. "You'll have whatever you need." That night, Clara stood in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She looked different now, harder, sharper. The girl who'd walked into this house 2 weeks ago, the scared governess desperate for survival, was gone. In her place was something else. A duchess, a strategist, a woman who'd learned to fight with weapons more subtle than fists. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. "Come in." Rowan entered, looking uncomfortable in a way she'd never seen. He held something in his hands, a small wooden box. "This was Vivian's," he said, setting it on the vanity. "I thought you might want it for the event." Clara opened the box. Inside was a necklace, emeralds and diamonds, breathtaking in their simplicity. "Rowan, I can't." "You can. You're my wife, and you'll need armor for what's coming." He met her eyes. "This is part of it." Clara lifted the necklace from the box, felt its weight in her hands. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol, a claim, a statement that she belonged here, whether anyone liked it or not. "Thank you," she whispered. Rowan nodded once, then turned to leave. But at the door he paused. "Clara?" She looked up. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "Better than I expected. Better than anyone expected." It was the kindest thing he'd ever said to her, and it terrified her more than any threat Victor could make, because it meant people were watching, waiting, hoping she'd fail. And now more than ever, she couldn't afford to. The 2 weeks before Victor's gathering passed like a countdown to execution. Clara threw herself into preparations with the same methodical focus she'd once used to teach children their letters. She studied every guest list Victor had sent, memorized names and titles and connections until she could recite them in her sleep. She practiced her curtsy until her knees ached. She rehearsed conversations with imaginary aristocrats until the words felt natural instead of foreign. And every night, she wore Vivian's necklace to dinner, letting the weight of it remind her what she was fighting for. Rowan noticed but said nothing. He'd grown quieter in recent days, more withdrawn, spending long hours locked in his study with correspondence he wouldn't discuss. Clara caught glimpses of official-looking documents, legal papers, things that made his jaw tight and his shoulders tense. Something was happening, something he wasn't telling her, but she had her own battles to fight. The morning of Victor's event, Clara woke before dawn with her stomach in knots. She dressed carefully. The new gown had arrived yesterday, deep burgundy silk that made her look older, more formidable. The kind of dress that said she wasn't afraid, even though she was. Mary helped her with her hair, pinning it up in an elaborate style that felt like armor. When she fastened Vivian's necklace around Clara's throat, their eyes met in the mirror. "You look like a queen, Your Grace," Mary said softly. Clara wished she felt like one. Rowan was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in formal black, looking every inch the Duke Society expected him to be. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or approval. "You look ready for war," he said. "Good." Clara took his offered arm, because that's what this is. The carriage ride to Victor's estate took an hour. They sat in silence, the tension between them thick enough to choke on. Clara watched the countryside roll past, manicured lawns, ancient trees, stone walls that had stood for centuries. This was Victor's world, his territory. They were walking into the lion's den. "Whatever happens tonight," Rowan said quietly, breaking the silence, "stay close to me. Don't let him separate us." "What's he planning?" "I don't know, but Victor doesn't do anything without a purpose." His jaw tightened. "And his purpose is always to win." Victor's estate was smaller than Blackmore House, but somehow more intimidating, all sharp angles and cold stone, like a fortress pretending to be a home. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging aristocrats in their finest clothes, all come to watch the spectacle. Come to watch Clara fail. She stepped out of the carriage with her head high and her spine straight, Rowan's hand steady at her elbow. Together, they walked up the steps and into hell. The ballroom was packed. Clara had expected a small gathering, maybe 24 guests. Instead, she was greeted by what looked like half of London society, hundreds of faces, all turning to stare as she and Rowan entered. Victor had set the stage for a public execution. He glided across the room to greet them, all charm and poison. "Cousin, how wonderful you could make it. And the Duchess, of course. You look surprisingly well." "Thank you for the invitation," Clara said, keeping her voice neutral. "Oh, it's my pleasure. After all, we're family now." His smile sharpened. "And families should celebrate together, don't you think?" Rowan's hand tightened on Clara's arm. "What game are you playing, Victor?" "Game? I'm hurt, cousin. This is a celebration, a chance for everyone to properly welcome your new bride into society." He gestured to the crowd. "Come, let me introduce you around." It was a gauntlet disguised as hospitality. Victor led them through the ballroom, introducing Clara to person after person, earls, viscounts, ladies with titles longer than Clara's entire lineage. Each introduction felt like a test, each conversation a minefield. "The new Duchess, how charming." "A governess, I heard. How modern." "Such a quick courtship. You must have swept her off her feet, Your Grace." The comments were barbed, the smiles false, the judgment palpable. Clara kept her responses short and polite, but she could feel herself being measured, weighed, and found wanting with every word. And through it all, Victor watched with the satisfied expression of a cat playing with a wounded bird. Then Lady Pemberton appeared, one of the women from that tea party weeks ago, the one who'd first planted the seeds of Clara's ruin. She glided up to Clara with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your Grace, what a transformation. From governess to duchess in mere weeks. It's quite the fairy tale." "Life is full of surprises," Clara said carefully. "Indeed." Lady Pemberton's eyes glittered. "Though I must confess I'm curious. How did you manage it? Such a rapid courtship. Such a convenient resolution to both your predicaments." The room seemed to quiet around them. Clara felt Rowan tense beside her. "I'm not sure I understand," Clara said. "Don't you? You were facing ruin. The Duke was facing scandal. And then suddenly, a marriage that solved both problems at once." Lady Pemberton tilted her head. "One might almost think it was arranged, a transaction rather than a romance." The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara's heart hammered. This was it, the trap springing shut. If she denied it too vehemently, she'd look guilty. If she confirmed it, she'd destroy any pretense that her marriage was legitimate. Before she could respond, Rowan spoke. "My relationship with my wife is none of your concern, Lady Pemberton." "Of course not, Your Grace. I meant no offense." But her smile said otherwise. "I was simply making conversation. After all, we're all friends here." They weren't friends. They were vultures circling a carcass. The evening deteriorated from there. More pointed questions. More thinly veiled accusations. More whispers that followed Clara and Rowan through the ballroom like ghosts. Victor orchestrated it all with surgical precision. A comment here, a suggestion there, stoking the fire until the entire room buzzed with speculation. By the time dinner was announced, Clara's nerves were frayed to breaking. The seating arrangement was deliberate torture. Clara found herself placed between two hostile strangers. A baron who barely acknowledged her existence, and a viscountess who spent the entire first course discussing the proper breeding required for a duchess, as if Clara weren't sitting right there. Rowan was seated 3 places down, too far to help, close enough to watch her struggle, and Victor sat at the head of the table, presiding over the carnage like a king. The meal crawled by. Clara picked at her food, unable to eat, her stomach twisted in knots. Conversation swirled around her. Politics, gossip, the kind of insider aristocratic chatter she couldn't follow, let alone participate in. She was drowning in silence while surrounded by noise. And then Victor stood, tapping his glass for attention. "My friends," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "I'd like to propose a toast to my cousin, the Duke of Blackmore, and his new bride. May their marriage be everything they hoped it would be." Everyone raised their glasses. Clara did the same, feeling the weight of those words. Everything they hoped it would be. Not love, not happiness, just hope. Desperate, fragile hope. Victor wasn't finished. "I must confess, when I first heard of the marriage, I was shocked. My cousin has been alone for so long, I'd quite given up hope he'd ever remarry. But then sometimes the most unexpected matches turn out to be the strongest. Polite laughter. Clara's hands trembled on her glass. Of course, Victor continued, his smile never wavering. There have been questions, rumors, whispers about the circumstances surrounding this union. But I think we should put those to rest, don't you? After all, what matters is that two people have found companionship. Isn't that right, cousin? All eyes turned to Rowan. He stood slowly, his face unreadable. What matters, Victor, is that my wife and I understand each other. What we have is no one's business but our own. Certainly, certainly. Victor's eyes glittered. Though I'm sure the Duchess wouldn't mind sharing how you met. I'm told it was at the opera? Or was it Lord Ashford's garden party? I've heard both stories. The room went still. Clara realized what was happening. Victor was testing them, trying to trip them up on the details of their supposed courtship. If they contradicted each other, if their story didn't match, it would confirm every suspicion in the room. She stood, forcing herself to meet Victor's eyes. We met at the opera, she said clearly, but we spoke properly at Lord Ashford's garden party. That's where His Grace asked if he might call on me. How romantic, Victor said. And did you fall in love immediately, or did it take time? It was a trap within a trap. If she said immediately, no one would believe her. If she said it took time, they'd question why the marriage happened so quickly. I don't think love follows a schedule, Clara said, echoing Rowan's words from weeks ago. Sometimes it grows slowly. Sometimes it strikes like lightning. Ours was somewhere in between. Victor's smile thinned. How poetic. Though I must say, for a romance that struck like lightning, you both seem remarkably composed. One might even say distant. One might also mind their own business, Rowan said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. The temperature in the room plummeted. Victor raised his hands in mock surrender. Of course, cousin. I meant no offense. I'm simply curious. We all are. After all, it's not every day a duke marries a governess. It raises questions. Questions about legitimacy, about heirs, about the future of the Blackmore title. And there it was. The real attack. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Victor wasn't just questioning their marriage. He was questioning whether any children they had would be legitimate heirs, whether the title would pass properly, whether Rowan was fit to hold it at all. It was brilliant, vicious, and completely devastating. The legitimacy of my marriage, Rowan said, his voice like ice, is not up for debate. Of course not. I merely meant, I know what you meant, Victor. Rowan set down his glass with deliberate care. And I think we're done here. But dessert hasn't even... We're done. Rowan took Clara's arm and steered her toward the door. The ballroom erupted in whispers behind them, but Clara didn't look back. She kept her eyes forward, her chin up, even though her legs felt like water and her chest felt like it was caving in. They made it to the carriage before Clara's composure cracked. He destroyed us, she whispered. He stood there in front of everyone and destroyed us. Not yet, Rowan said grimly. What do you mean, not yet? Everyone in that room thinks our marriage is a sham. They think I'm a fraud and you're a fool, and they think what Victor wanted them to think. Rowan's jaw was tight, but thinking isn't knowing, and Victor just made a mistake. What mistake? He showed his hand too early, revealed what he's after. Rowan turned to face her. He wants the title, Clara, and he's willing to destroy both of us to get it. But now that we know that, we can fight back. How? By giving them proof that our marriage is real. Clara stared at him. How do we prove something that isn't true? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice careful. We make it true. The words hung between them like a challenge. Clara's mind raced. You mean... I mean we stop living like strangers. We stop keeping to separate rooms and separate lives. We present a united front, not just in public, but in private. We become the couple everyone expects us to be. That's a lie. It's survival. His eyes met hers. Unless you have a better idea. Clara didn't, and the worst part was she knew he was right. Victor had backed them into a corner. Either they committed fully to this charade, or they'd both go down in flames. What about what you said? Clara asked quietly. About not touching me, about giving me space. I'm not suggesting we consummate the marriage, Clara. I'm suggesting we stop acting like we can't stand to be in the same room. He paused. Unless you can't. Can you? Rowan looked at her for a long moment. I think we're both stronger than we realize. It wasn't an answer, but it was something. The carriage rolled through the dark, carrying them back to Blackmore House, and Clara felt the weight of what they'd just agreed to settle over her like chains. They weren't just playing husband and wife anymore. They were becoming it. The next morning, the scandal sheets were brutal. Duke's marriage in question, read one headline. From governess to duchess. A tale of convenience, read another. The articles were full of speculation, innuendo, and thinly veiled accusations. Victor had made sure the gossip from his gathering spread like wildfire. Clara read them in the breakfast room, her coffee growing cold, and felt her stomach twist. Stop reading that garbage, Rowan said from the doorway. She looked up. He was dressed for riding, still holding his gloves. We need to know what they're saying. We already know. We were there. The newspapers make it worse. They're calling our marriage a fraud, Rowan. They're saying, I don't care what they're saying. He crossed the room, took the papers from her hands, and tossed them in the fireplace. The only opinions that matter are the ones that carry legal weight. And Victor doesn't have that. Not yet. What do you mean, not yet? Rowan sank into the chair across from her, suddenly looking exhausted. There's something I haven't told you. His heart sank. What? Victor's been building a case, legal grounds to challenge the succession. He's arguing that I'm unfit to hold the title, that my judgment is compromised, that the marriage proves it. Can he do that? If he gets enough support from the House of Lords, yes. He can petition for a review, force an inquiry into my competence. And if they find merit in his claims, Rowan trailed off. They could strip you of the title and give it to him. Clara felt the room spin. When were you going to tell me this? When I had a solution. And do you? Not yet. He met her eyes. But I'm working on it. Clara stood, paced to the window, trying to process this. Everything they'd been doing, the appearances, the strategy, the careful navigation of society, it was all just buying time. Victor wasn't just trying to embarrass them. He was trying to take everything. What do we do? Clara asked. We fight. We give him nothing to use against us. We make this marriage so convincing that no one can question it. Rowan's voice hardened. And we find a way to neutralize him before he neutralizes us. How? I don't know yet, but Victor's not the only one with connections. He's not the only one who can play dirty. Rowan stood. I need to go to London. There are people I need to speak with, allies I need to shore up. How long will you be gone? 3 days? Maybe 4. Clara's stomach dropped. You're leaving me here? Now? When Victor's circling like a shark? You'll be safe. The house is secure. The staff... He paused. Most of the staff are loyal. Most. Not all. Clara felt panic rising. Rowan, I can't... You can. He gripped her shoulders, forced her to meet his eyes. You're stronger than you think, Clara. You've already proven that. You took down a thief, won over my daughters, and survived Victor's ambush last night. You can handle 3 days. What if something happens? Then you handle it, the same way you've handled everything else. He released her, stepped back. I'll send word if I'm delayed. And Clara? Yes? Don't trust anyone. Not the servants, not the neighbors, not anyone who comes calling. Victor has spies everywhere. With that cheerful warning, he left. Clara stood alone in the breakfast room, listening to the sound of his horse's hooves fading down the drive, and wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake trusting him. The first day alone was quiet. Too quiet. Clara spent the morning with Lily and Grace, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. They did lessons, took tea, walked in the gardens, but even the girls seemed to sense something was wrong. Where's Father gone? Lily asked. London, on business. When will he be back? Soon. Lily didn't look convinced. He always goes to London when things are bad. Clara studied the girl. What do you mean? After Mama died, he went to London for weeks. Miss Holloway said he couldn't bear to be here, to see her things, to remember. Lily's voice dropped. Is he running away from you too? The question hit like a fist. No, Clara said firmly. He's handling business, that's all. But she wondered if Lily was right. That afternoon, a visitor arrived. Clara was in the drawing room when Mrs. Connolly announced her. "Lady Margot Ashford, Your Grace." Clara's stomach clenched. Lady Ashford's daughter, one of Victor's allies. This couldn't be good. "Send her in." Lady Margot swept into the room like she owned it, young, beautiful, dripping with confidence. She'd been one of the women at Victor's gathering, Clara remembered. One of the ones who'd smiled while tearing her apart. "Your Grace, how kind of you to receive me." "Lady Margot?" Clara gestured to a chair. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Oh, I was simply passing by and thought I'd pay a call. We are neighbors, after all." They weren't. Lady Margot's estate was 20 miles away. Clara poured tea, her mind racing. What was this? A social call? A spying mission? An attempt to gather more ammunition for Victor? "I must say," Margot continued, accepting her cup, "you handled last night beautifully. Victor can be quite intense." "He was being a good host." "Is that what you call it?" Margot's smile sharpened. "I call it an interrogation. But you held your own. I was impressed." Clara didn't trust the compliment. "Thank you. Of course, the questions he raised were valid. Society does wonder about the circumstances of your marriage." "My marriage is my business." "True. But when it affects the succession of one of England's oldest titles, it becomes everyone's business." Margot sipped her tea delicately. "Tell me, Your Grace, do you love the Duke?" The directness of it shocked Clara. "I beg your pardon?" "It's a simple question. Do you love him? Or is this truly just a convenient arrangement?" Clara set down her cup carefully. "I think this conversation is over. I don't mean to offend. I'm simply curious." Margot leaned forward. "You see, I know what it's like to marry for reasons other than love. My own marriage was arranged. And I've learned that in our world, love is a luxury few can afford. But pretending to love someone when you don't, that takes a special kind of strength." Clara's blood ran cold. "What are you implying?" "Nothing, simply offering solidarity." Margot stood. "We should be friends, you and I. We have more in common than you think." "I doubt that." "Don't you?" "We're both women navigating a world controlled by men, both trying to survive in a system designed to crush us." Her eyes glittered. "The only difference is I've learned to use it to my advantage. Perhaps you could too." "I think you should leave," Margot smiled. "Of course. But think about what I said, Your Grace. Victor's not your only option. There are other alliances you could make, other paths to safety." She left in a rustle of silk, leaving Clara alone with a sick feeling in her stomach. That was a recruitment attempt. Victor was trying to turn her against Rowan. And the terrifying part? For a moment, Clara had been tempted. The second day, things started going wrong. It began small. Clara's correspondence went missing. Her favorite teacup was shattered, the pieces left on her vanity like a threat. The fire in her room went out in the middle of the night, leaving her freezing. Small things. Deliberate things. Someone in the house was trying to unsettle her. Clara confronted Mrs. Connolly. "I want to know who's been in my rooms." "Only the maids, Your Grace, Mary and Jane." "Then one of them is sabotaging me." Mrs. Connolly's face remained impassive. "I'm sure it's simply carelessness." "It's not carelessness, it's malice." Clara stepped closer. "And if it continues, I'll dismiss both of them and hire replacements. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal, Your Grace." But the attacks didn't stop. If anything, they escalated. That afternoon, Clara found Lily crying in the nursery. "What's wrong?" "Someone took Mama's locket, the one Father gave me. It was in my drawer and now it's gone." Clara's blood boiled. Going after her was one thing. Going after Rowan's children was another. She tore through the house, questioning every servant, searching every room. Finally, she found it, tucked in the back of a linen closet, deliberately hidden. But who'd put it there? Clara had her suspicions, but she couldn't prove anything. That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every shadow felt like a threat. She was alone in a hostile place, surrounded by enemies she couldn't see, fighting a war she didn't know how to win. And Rowan wasn't coming back for 2 more days. The third morning, Grace fell ill. It started with a cough, then a fever. By noon, she was delirious, burning up, barely responsive. Clara sent for the doctor immediately, but he was 3 towns away, wouldn't arrive until evening at the earliest. In the meantime, Grace got worse, much worse. "We need to cool her down," Clara told Mary, her voice sharper than she meant. "Cold cloths, ice if we have it, move her to a cooler room." "But, Your Grace, Miss Holloway says—" "I don't care what Miss Holloway says. Do it, now." They moved Grace to a ground-floor room, stripped her to her chemise, covered her with cold compresses. Clara sat beside her, monitoring her breathing, her pulse, terror clawing at her throat. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not while Rowan was gone. Miss Holloway appeared in the doorway, face pinched with disapproval. "You're making her worse. The child needs rest and warmth, not this barbaric—" "Get out!" Clara snapped. "I beg your pardon? Get out of this room, right now, or I swear I'll have you thrown out of this house." Miss Holloway's face went purple, but she left. The doctor finally arrived at dusk. He examined Grace, his expression grave. "Scarlet fever," he said quietly. Clara's world stopped. "Will she? If the fever breaks in the next 24 hours, she has a chance. If it doesn't—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Clara sent word to Rowan immediately. Then she settled in to fight. She stayed with Grace through the night, changing the compresses, forcing sips of water between cracked lips, willing the fever to break. Lily sat in the corner, pale and terrified, watching her sister fight for her life. "Is she going to die?" Lily whispered. "No," Clara said fiercely. "She's not. I won't let her." But she didn't know if that was a promise she could keep. Dawn came gray and cold. Grace's fever hadn't broken. If anything, she'd gotten worse. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse weak. Clara was running out of options. And then, like an answer to a prayer she hadn't spoken, Rowan burst through the door. He looked like he'd ridden all night, disheveled, exhausted, wild-eyed. He took one look at Grace, and his face went white. "How long has she been like this?" "Since yesterday morning. The doctor says if the fever doesn't break soon—" Clara's voice cracked. Rowan dropped to his knees beside the bed, took his daughter's small hand in his. "Grace, sweetheart, can you hear me?" No response. Clara had never seen Rowan look afraid before. But she saw it now, raw, terrible fear. "What do we do?" she asked. "We keep fighting." His voice was rough. "We don't give up. Not on her, not ever." They fought. Together, they worked through that long, terrible day. Rowan held Grace while Clara forced medicine down her throat. Clara changed the compresses while Rowan read to her, his voice steady even though his hands shook. They took turns, traded off, neither willing to leave her side. And slowly, impossibly slowly, the fever started to break. By evening, Grace's eyes fluttered open. "Papa?" Rowan's face crumpled. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. I don't feel good." "I know, but you're going to be fine. You're going to be just fine." He buried his face in her hair, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Clara backed toward the door, giving them privacy. But Rowan's voice stopped her. "Clara, don't go." She turned. He was looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Gratitude, respect, and something else, something deeper. "You saved her," he said quietly. "You did too." "No, you kept her alive until I got here. You refused to let her go." His voice broke. "Thank you." Clara's chest felt too tight. "She's my daughter too, now." The words hung in the air between them. Rowan stood, crossed the room, and did something he'd never done before. He pulled Clara into his arms and held her. Not like a stranger, not like a business partner, like a husband holding his wife after they'd survived something terrible together. And Clara, who'd been strong for so long, who'd fought so hard to keep from breaking, finally let herself lean into him. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd started as strangers, bonded now by something more powerful than any contract, by survival, by trust, by the fragile, terrifying beginning of something real. But outside the window, a rider approached. A messenger, bringing news that would change everything. Victor had made his move. He'd filed a formal petition with the House of Lords, challenging Rowan's competence and the legitimacy of his marriage. The war they'd been preparing for had just begun. And this time, there would be no retreat. The messenger stood in the entrance hall, mud-splattered and breathing hard, holding a sealed letter like it might explode. Rowan took it from him, broke the seal, and read in silence. Clara watched his face go from exhausted to stone cold in the space of 3 heartbeats. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the letter without a word. Clara scanned the formal legal language, her stomach sinking with each line. Victor had filed a petition with the House of Lords. He was challenging Rowan's mental fitness to hold the title, citing the hasty and suspicious marriage to a woman of questionable background as evidence of compromised judgment. He was calling for a formal inquiry, and he'd secured signatures from 12 peers supporting the petition. 12. More than enough to force a hearing. "When?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 weeks. Parliament's next session. Rowan's jaw was tight. He waited until I was out of London, made his move while I couldn't counter it. "What happens at the hearing?" "They'll question me. Question you. Dig into every detail of our courtship, our marriage, our lives." He met her eyes. "They'll be looking for any crack in our story, any inconsistency, any proof that this marriage is a fraud. And if they find it, then the title passes to Victor, the estates, everything." His voice went flat. "And we lose it all." Clara felt the weight of it settle over her like a shroud. 2 weeks. 14 days to prepare for a battle that could destroy everything they'd fought for. 14 days to make a lie convincing enough to fool the most powerful men in England. "Then we'd better make sure they don't find anything," she said. Rowan looked at her, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "You understand what that means? What we'll have to do?" "I understand. They'll question the servants, the neighbors, anyone who's seen us together. If even one person says we seem distant, cold, like strangers, then we make sure no one can say that." Clara straightened her spine. "Starting now." The next morning, Clara called for Mrs. Connolly. The housekeeper arrived looking wary, as if she expected another confrontation. Instead, Clara gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down, Mrs. Connolly. We need to talk." The woman sat, spine rigid, face guarded. "I know you don't like me," Clara said bluntly. "I know you think I don't belong here, that I'm an intruder who married above her station." Mrs. Connolly's mouth thinned, but she said nothing. "And maybe you're right," Clara continued. "Maybe I don't belong. But I'm here anyway. And in 2 weeks, people are going to come to this house asking questions about my marriage, about whether it's real, about whether the Duke and I are truly husband and wife." She let that sink in. "If they decide we're not," Clara said quietly, "Victor Blackmore becomes the Duke, and the first thing he'll do is tear this household apart. Replace every servant who was loyal to Rowan, gut the staff, bring in his own people." Mrs. Connolly's face paled slightly. "So you have a choice," Clara said. "You can continue resenting me, continue treating me like I don't belong, and hope Victor remembers your loyalty when he takes over. Or you can help me convince those investigators that this marriage is real, that this household is stable, that the Duke made the right choice." The silence stretched. "What are you asking?" Mrs. Connolly said finally. "I'm asking you to do your job. Nothing more. Treat me like the Duchess I am. Make sure the rest of the staff does the same. And when those investigators come asking questions, tell them what they need to hear." "You want me to lie?" "I want you to survive." Clara leaned forward. "Because if Victor wins, none of us do. Not me, not Rowan, not you, not any of the people who've served this house for years." Mrs. Connolly studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" Clara spent the rest of the day putting her plan in motion. She met with every senior servant individually, made the same pitch, secured the same reluctant cooperation. By evening, the entire household understood. Their survival was tied to hers. It wasn't loyalty, not yet, but it was alignment, and right now, that was enough. That night, she found Rowan in his study, surrounded by legal documents and correspondence. He looked up when she entered, exhaustion written in every line of his face. "We need to practice," Clara said. "Practice what?" "Being married." She crossed the room, perched on the edge of his desk. "If we're going to convince Parliament, we need to convince everyone else first. the servants, the neighbors, anyone who might be called to testify. And how do we do that? We stop living separate lives. We eat meals together. We take walks. We sit in the same room. Clara paused. We act like people who chose each other, not people who got trapped together. Rowan set down his pen. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's necessary. She met his eyes. Can you do it? Can you? Clara thought about Vivian's necklace, heavy around her throat. Thought about Grace, fighting for her life while Clara refused to let go. Thought about standing in Rowan's arms, feeling something shift between them. Yes, she said. I can. Rowan stood, closed the distance between them. He was close enough now that Clara could see the flecks of gray in his dark hair, the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion and determination warring in his expression. Then we start now, he said quietly. He offered his hand. Clara took it, and together they began the performance of their lives. Over the next 3 days, they transformed. Breakfast became a shared meal, the two of them sitting at the same end of the long table, close enough to pass dishes, to make conversation, to look like partners. Rowan started asking about Clara's day, her plans, the small details of running the household. Clara started doing the same. At first it felt forced, artificial, like actors reading lines. But slowly, something changed. Clara learned that Rowan took his coffee black, but preferred tea in the afternoon. That he had a dry sense of humor she'd never noticed before. That he genuinely cared about the people who worked for him, even if he showed it through efficiency rather than warmth. Rowan learned that Clara had opinions on everything from politics to literature and wasn't afraid to voice them. That she was ruthlessly organized but hopelessly bad at needlework. That she had a temper she usually kept locked down, but when it flared, it was spectacular. They started taking walks together in the gardens, with Lily and Grace trailing behind. Started sitting together in the drawing room in the evenings, Clara reading while Rowan worked on correspondence. Started looking less like strangers sharing a house and more like a family. The servants noticed. Clara caught them watching, whispering, reassessing. Good. Let them see the change. Let them report it when the investigators came. But the real test came when the neighbors started calling. Lady Pemberton was the first, arriving with her daughter and a thinly veiled excuse about returning a borrowed book. Clara received them in the drawing room, Rowan joining them within minutes, a deliberate show of unity. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton said, eyes sharp as she took in the scene. How is dear Grace? I heard she was quite ill. She's recovering, thank you, Clara said. It was a difficult few days. I'm sure. How fortunate the Duke returned when he did. There was something in her tone, a probe, testing for weakness. Fortunate indeed, Rowan said, his hand settling on Clara's shoulder. A casual touch, but deliberate, possessive. Though Clara had matters well in hand before I arrived, she saved our daughter's life. The emphasis on our daughter wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Lady Pemberton's smile tightened. How wonderful. You must be very grateful to have found such a capable wife, Your Grace. I am. Every day, he said it looking at Clara, and for a moment she almost believed him. The visit ended cordially enough, but Clara knew what it really was. Reconnaissance. Lady Pemberton would report back to Victor, tell him what she'd seen, what she'd sensed. Let her. They'd given her nothing to use. More visitors followed, more probing questions, more careful observation. Each time, Clara and Rowan presented the same united front. Each time, they played their roles a little more naturally. And each time, Clara felt the performance becoming less of a performance. A week before the hearing, Rowan's solicitor arrived from London with news. Victor's built a strong case, the man said grimly, spreading documents across Rowan's desk. Witness statements from servants who claim you and the Duchess live separate lives. Testimony from society members who say the courtship was suspiciously brief. Questions about the timing, the circumstances, the lack of proper engagement period. Can we counter it? Rowan asked. We can try, but we need ammunition, evidence that the marriage is legitimate, that you and the Duchess have a genuine partnership. Clara and Rowan exchanged glances. We have that, Clara said. The household staff will testify that we're a functional couple. The neighbors have seen us together. We can provide witnesses. The solicitor looked doubtful. It may not be enough. Victor has 12 peers supporting his petition, men with influence. They're not going to be swayed by servants' testimony alone. Then what do we need? Clara demanded. The solicitor hesitated. Honestly, you need to be pregnant. The words hit like a physical blow. Clara felt her face go hot. That's impossible, Rowan finished. We can't manufacture a child in a week. No, but you could claim you're expecting. Early pregnancy wouldn't show yet. By the time anyone could verify otherwise, the hearing would be over, the petition dismissed. That's fraud, Clara said. That's survival, the solicitor countered. Victor's playing dirty. Sometimes you have to do the same. After he left, Clara and Rowan sat in silence. We're not doing that, Rowan said finally. Why not? He's right. It would work. Because it's a lie that will come back to destroy us. In 3 months, when there's no pregnancy, Victor will petition again. Call us frauds. And this time he'll have proof. Clara knew he was right. But the desperation was creeping in now, cold and insidious. Then what do we do? She asked. Rowan stood, paced to the window. We fight with the truth. Show them what we've built. The household, the partnership, the family. Will that be enough? It has to be. But neither of them sounded convinced. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, the bed she still slept in alone, despite all their efforts to appear united, and stared at the ceiling. In a week, she'd stand before the most powerful men in England and defend her right to be here. Defend a marriage she'd entered to escape ruin. Defend a life she was only beginning to understand. And if she failed, she'd lose it all. A soft knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Come in. Rowan entered, still dressed, holding a candle. He looked as sleepless as she felt. Can't sleep either? Clara asked. No. He hesitated in the doorway. May I? She nodded, and he crossed to sit in the chair by her window, the same spot he'd occupied on their wedding night, when he'd promised not to touch her. I've been thinking, Rowan said quietly, about what the solicitor said. About lying to Parliament? About what we need to prove. He met her eyes. We need to prove this marriage is real, that we're partners, not strangers. But we can't do that while still living like strangers. Clara's heart started to pound. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to stop pretending, to stop keeping to separate rooms and separate lives. He paused. I'm suggesting we make this marriage real, in every way. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Rowan, Clara said carefully, if you're asking what I think you're asking, I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give, he interrupted. I'm simply saying that if we're going to survive this, we need to commit, fully. No more half measures, no more pretending in public and retreating in private. Clara sat up, pulling the blanket around herself. You said you wouldn't touch me, that I had my space and you had yours. I know what I said, but that was before Victor declared war, before everything changed. His voice dropped. Before Grace almost died, and I realized what you really are to this family. What am I? Essential. The word hung between them like a bridge. Clara's mind raced. He was right. They needed to commit fully if they had any chance of winning, but committing fully meant crossing a line they couldn't uncross, meant turning this strategic arrangement into something real. And Clara wasn't sure she was ready for that. I need time, she said finally. Rowan nodded, stood. You have until the hearing. After that, we either go all in or we lose. He left her alone with that ultimatum, and Clara lay back down, her mind spinning. 5 days before the hearing, the Dowager Duchess arrived unannounced. She swept into Blackmore House like a storm, dismissed the servants with a wave, and cornered Clara in the drawing room. So, she said without preamble, Victor's made his move. You heard. Everyone's heard. It's the scandal of the season. The Dowager studied Clara with those sharp eyes. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Fight. What else can we do? You can win. The Dowager sat down, arranged her skirts. But not by playing Victor's game. He's better at politics than you are. Better connected. More ruthless. Then how do we beat him? By changing the game. The Dowager leaned forward. Victor's argument is that your marriage is a sham. That it was arranged out of desperation, not love. That Rowan's judgment is compromised. All of which is true. Truth is irrelevant. What matters is what you can prove. The dowager's eyes glinted. And what I can help you prove. Clara's pulse quickened. What do you mean? I mean I have letters, correspondence between Rowan and myself, dating back months before your marriage. Letters where he spoke of you, where he confessed his growing attachment, where he wrestled with the propriety of pursuing a woman below his station. Clara stared. Those letters don't exist. They do now. The dowager smiled, sharp as a blade. I've spent the last week writing them, backdating them, aging the paper. They'll pass any inspection. That's forgery. That's strategy. The dowager pulled a bundle of letters from her bag, set them on the table between them. Read them. Learn them. Because when Parliament asks how your relationship developed, this is the story you'll tell. Not a desperate arrangement. A genuine courtship that Rowan kept quiet out of respect for propriety. Clara picked up the top letter, read Rowan's forged handwriting. It was good, convincing, full of the kind of conflicted emotion that would make their marriage seem real. Why are you doing this? Clara asked. Because Victor cannot have this title. Because my son deserves better than to be destroyed by a snake in expensive clothes. The dowager's voice hardened. And because you've proven you're strong enough to be a blackamoor. Now prove you're smart enough. She left the letters and swept out, leaving Clara alone with a stack of beautiful lies that might save them all. When Clara showed the letters to Rowan that evening, he read them in silence, his expression unreadable. My mother wrote these, he said finally. Yes, they're forgeries. Yes, and you want to use them. Clara met his eyes. Do you have a better idea? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he set the letters down carefully. No, he said. I don't. They spent the next 2 days memorizing the narrative the letters created. A slow courtship that began at the opera, developed through careful correspondence, blossomed into genuine affection. They practiced telling the story together, making sure their versions matched, that every detail aligned, and somewhere in the process of crafting the lie, Clara realized something strange. The emotions the letters described, the conflicted attraction, the growing respect, the reluctant affection, weren't entirely fictional anymore. She'd started to feel them for real. 2 days before the hearing, disaster struck. One of the letters went missing. Clara discovered it during a final review, frantically searching through the stack. It's not here. The third letter, the one from August. It's gone. Rowan's face went pale. Are you certain? I've checked 3 times. Someone took it. Who's been in this room? Just the servants? Mary, Mrs. Connolly, the footman? Clara's blood ran cold. Victor's spy, whoever's been feeding him information. They took it. If that letter reaches Victor, he'll know they're forgeries. He'll expose us in front of Parliament. They stared at each other, the weight of the disaster settling over them. We have to find it, Rowan said. Search the house. Question everyone. Turn this place upside down if we have to. They did. For hours, they tore through Blackmore House, searching servants' quarters, interrogating staff, following every lead. But the letter was gone. And whoever had taken it was good at covering their tracks. By midnight, they'd found nothing. Clara stood in Rowan's study, exhausted and terrified. Victor's going to destroy us. Not yet. Rowan's jaw was set. We still have 2 days. We find that letter, or we find who took it, or what? Or we go to London and we fight anyway, without the letters, if we have to. We'll lose. Maybe. But we'll lose fighting. He crossed to her, gripped her shoulders. I'm not giving up, Clara. Not on this house. Not on my daughters. And not on you. The intensity in his eyes took her breath away. Why? She whispered. Why fight so hard for something that was never supposed to be real? Because it is real now, he said fiercely. This marriage, this partnership, this life we've built. It started as survival, but it's become something more. And I'll be damned if I let Victor take it from us. His hands tightened on her shoulders, and Clara realized he was trembling, not with fear, with rage, with determination, with something that looked a lot like love. Rowan, she started, but he cut her off. I know what I said, about love being a luxury, about this being just a strategy. His voice cracked. But I was wrong, Clara. Because somewhere between the wedding and Grace's fever, and every moment in between, I stopped seeing you as a solution to a problem. I started seeing you as my wife, my partner, my... He didn't finish. Instead, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't tentative. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they'd been holding back for weeks. Clara's mind went blank, then white hot, and she was kissing him back, hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to win this," he said, "together." And for the first time, Clara believed him. The next morning, Clara woke in her own bed, but something had changed. The distance between them was gone, burned away by that kiss, by everything it represented. She dressed quickly and went downstairs, where she found Mary waiting in the hall, looking nervous. "Your Grace, I need to tell you something." Clara's heart stopped. "What?" "I know who took the letter. I saw them hide it." Mary's hands twisted in her apron. "I didn't say anything before because I was scared, but I can't stay quiet anymore, not when... Who was it?" "Miss Holloway." Of course. The governess who'd resented Clara from the start, who'd had access to the study, to the letters, to everything. Clara found Miss Holloway in the nursery packing her things. "Leaving?" Clara asked coldly. The woman turned, chin raised defiantly. "I've resigned, effective immediately." "Not before you return what you stole." Miss Holloway's face remained impassive. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The letter. The one you took from the Duke's study 2 days ago." Clara stepped closer. "The one you were planning to give to Victor Blackmore." A flicker of something crossed the governess's face. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. "Even if I had taken it," Miss Holloway said carefully, "why would I give it back? You've treated me with nothing but contempt since you arrived. Why should I help you?" "Because if Victor wins, these girls lose their home, their father, everything." Clara's voice shook. "Because regardless of what you think of me, you care about Lily and Grace. I've seen it, and you know that Victor won't keep them. He'll send them away the moment he takes over." Miss Holloway's face crumpled. "Please," Clara said quietly. "Not for me. For them." After a long, terrible moment, Miss Holloway reached into her bag and pulled out the folded letter. "I hate you for what you are," she said, handing it over. "But I hate Victor more." Clara took the letter, relief flooding through her. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just win." The day of the hearing arrived cold and gray. Clara wore Vivian's necklace and the burgundy gown, and every ounce of courage she could summon. Rowan stood beside her in the carriage, their hands clasped, neither speaking. They didn't need to. Parliament was intimidating in a way Clara hadn't prepared for. The ancient building, the solemn faces, the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on her shoulders. She and Rowan were ushered into a chamber where 12 peers sat in judgment, with Victor watching from the side like a cat eyeing a wounded bird. The questioning began. They asked about the courtship, the timing, the circumstances. Clara answered carefully, weaving the narrative from the forged letters, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Rowan backed her up, his testimony matching hers perfectly. Then Victor stood. "My lords," he said smoothly, "I have witnesses who will testify that this marriage is a sham, servants who've observed the Duke and Duchess living separate lives, society members who've noted the coldness between them." He called his witnesses, a dismissed footman, a bitter acquaintance, people who painted a picture of a marriage of convenience, not love. But then it was Clara and Rowan's turn. Mrs. Connolly testified about the united household, the partnership she'd witnessed. Mary described seeing them care for Grace together, how they'd fought side by side to save her. The Dowager presented the letters, explaining how her son had confided his growing feelings for Clara months before the marriage. And then Lily stood. The 8-year-old walked to the front of the chamber, looked directly at the peers, and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "Clara saved my sister's life. She didn't have to. She could have just let the doctor handle it. But she stayed. She fought. She refused to give up." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "And my father loves her. I can see it. They love each other. And if you take that away from us, you're not just hurting them. You're hurting me and Grace too." The chamber went silent. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Rowan's hand found hers, squeezed tight. The lead pier cleared his throat. "We'll deliberate and deliver our verdict within the hour." The wait was agony. Clara and Rowan stood outside the chamber, neither able to sit, both too wound up to speak. Victor paced nearby, confident smirk still in place. Finally, they were called back in. The lead peer stood, his face grave. "After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, this committee has reached a decision." He paused, and Clara's heart stopped. "We find no merit in the petition to challenge the Duke of Blackmore's competence or the legitimacy of his marriage. The petition is dismissed." The relief was so intense Clara nearly collapsed. Victor's face went white, then red. "This is a farce. They're lying. All of them." "Enough, Mr. Blackmore," the peer said coldly. "The matter is settled, and I suggest you accept the ruling with grace, or face consequences for this baseless attack on your cousin's reputation." Victor's mouth snapped shut, but the look he gave Clara and Rowan was pure venom. They'd won. But Clara knew this wasn't over. Not really. Outside, the cold London air hit Clara's face like a blessing. She gulped it down, trying to process what had just happened. "We did it," she whispered. Rowan pulled her into his arms, held her tight. "You did it. You and Lily and everyone who stood with us. Victor's not going to stop." "No, but he's been bloodied, and everyone saw it." Rowan pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. "We bought ourselves time, and we'll use it to build something he can't touch." "How?" "By making this marriage as real as everyone thinks it is." His eyes searched hers. "If you want that." Clara thought about everything they'd been through. The fear, the fighting, the slow transformation from strangers to partners. She thought about that kiss in the study, about Grace's fever, about standing together against the world. "I want that," she said. Rowan smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. "Then let's go home." They rode back to Blackmore House together, hands clasped, the future uncertain, but suddenly less terrifying, because they'd faced the worst and survived, and whatever came next, they'd face it together. They rode back to Blackmore House together, hands clasped, the future uncertain, but suddenly less terrifying, because they'd faced the worst and survived, and whatever came next, they'd face it together. The journey took most of the day, the countryside passing in a blur of winter-bare trees and gray sky. Clara dozed against Rowan's shoulder, exhausted from the tension of the hearing, from weeks of barely sleeping, from the sheer weight of everything they'd carried. When she woke, the sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of orange and gold. Blackmore House rose ahead of them, dark against the sky. But for the first time since Clara had arrived, it didn't look quite so forbidding. It looked like home. The staff was waiting when they arrived, lined up in the entrance hall, faces anxious. Mrs. Connolly stepped forward first. "Your Grace, Your Grace!" She dipped into a curtsy that was deeper, more genuine than any she'd given Clara before. "We heard the news. The whole household is... We're glad you're back." Clara felt something catch in her throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Connolly. The girls have been asking for you. They're in the drawing room." Clara and Rowan exchanged glances, then headed up together. When they pushed open the door, they found Lily and Grace huddled on the sofa, Lily reading aloud while Grace listened with her head on her sister's shoulder. Both girls looked up as the door opened. Then Grace launched herself off the sofa and ran straight to Clara, wrapping her arms around Clara's waist. "You're back! Did you win? Are we safe?" Clara knelt, pulled Grace close. "We won, sweetheart. We're safe." "All of us?" Lily asked quietly, still standing by the sofa. Rowan crossed to his older daughter, rested a hand on her shoulder. "All of us." Lily's face crumpled, and she threw herself into her father's arms, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Clara watched them, Grace still clinging to her, and felt her own tears start. They'd won more than a legal battle. They'd won this. A family. Fragile and imperfect, but real. That night, after the girls were in bed, Clara found herself standing outside Rowan's study, her heart pounding. The door was open, light spilling into the hallway. Rowan sat at his desk, going through correspondence, but he looked up when her shadow fell across the threshold. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No." Clara stepped inside, closed the door behind her. "I've been thinking." "About?" About what you said, about making this marriage real. Rowan set down his pen, giving her his full attention. And? Clara crossed to his desk, her hands trembling slightly. And I think it already is real. It has been for a while. I just wasn't ready to admit it. What changed? Everything. She laughed, the sound shaky. You, me, watching you hold Grace while she fought that fever. Standing beside you in Parliament, realizing that somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending and started living. Rowan stood, moved around the desk until he was standing in front of her. Clara. I'm scared, she interrupted. I'm terrified, actually, because this wasn't supposed to happen. We weren't supposed to become this. But we did. And I don't know how to be married for real when we started with a lie. Then we figure it out together. Rowan reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The same way we figured out everything else. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. But it's worth it. His voice dropped. You're worth it. Clara felt her breath catch. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into it, the fear and the hope, and the terrifying, wonderful reality of what they'd become. When they finally broke apart, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he said quietly. Not in your room. Here, with me. Clara knew what he was asking, what it meant. Yes, she whispered. They didn't rush. Rowan led her upstairs to his chambers, rooms Clara had never entered, even though they were connected to hers by a door that had stayed locked since their wedding night. He unlocked it now. The room was masculine, spare, nothing like the ornate chambers Clara had expected. It was just Rowan, practical and understated, with none of the aristocratic excess she'd grown used to seeing. I'm not good at this, Rowan said, suddenly sounding uncertain in a way Clara had never heard from him. At intimacy. At letting someone in? Vivian was... She made it easy. But I've been alone so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else. Clara took his hand. Then we'll learn together. What happened next was tender and awkward and nothing like the cold transaction Clara had feared on her wedding night. It was real, fumbling and nervous and punctuated by quiet laughter when they got in each other's way. It was Rowan's hand shaking as he unlaced her gown, Clara's breath hitching as he kissed her shoulder. Two people who'd spent months circling each other, finally letting their guards drop. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Clara's head on Rowan's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. I never thought I'd have this again, Rowan said quietly. After Vivian died, I closed that part of myself off. Decided it was safer to be alone than to risk losing someone else. What changed? You did. You walked into my life refusing to be what I expected, refusing to be quiet or small or manageable. His arms tightened around her. You made me want to try again. Clara lifted her head, met his eyes in the dim light. I'm still scared. So am I. Good. Then we'll be scared together. Rowan smiled, pulled her closer, and they fell asleep like that. No longer strangers bound by necessity, but partners choosing each other, one day at a time. The next morning brought trouble in the form of a letter. Clara found it at breakfast, delivered by special messenger, sealed with Victor's family crest. Her stomach sank as she broke the seal and read, Cousin, congratulations on your victory. I'm sure you're enjoying your moment of triumph, but don't get comfortable. This isn't over. You may have fooled Parliament, but we both know the truth. That marriage is a farce, and sooner or later everyone else will see it too. I'm a patient man. I can wait. Victor Clara handed the letter to Rowan without a word. He read it, his jaw tightening. He's not going to let this go, Clara said. No, but he's also just revealed his hand. He's angry, desperate. That makes him dangerous, but also reckless. Rowan set the letter down. We can use that. How? By doing exactly what we've been doing, living our lives, building our family, making this marriage so unassailable that no one can question it. He met her eyes. And by being ready when he makes his next move. Over the following weeks, that's exactly what they did. Clara threw herself into running the household with a confidence she hadn't had before. She made changes, small ones at first, then larger. Reorganized the staff schedules, updated the accounting systems, started hosting small gatherings for local families, rebuilding the social connections Rowan had let atrophy after Vivian's death. And the staff responded, not with the resentment Clara had expected, but with something close to respect. Mrs. Connolly started asking for Clara's opinion on household matters, instead of just informing her of decisions already made. The maid stopped whispering when she passed. Even the footman nodded politely. Clara was becoming what she'd only pretended to be, the Duchess. Meanwhile, Rowan started coming out of his self-imposed isolation. He accepted invitations to dinners, took Clara to the theater, appeared at social functions he'd avoided for years. And everywhere they went, they presented a united front. People noticed. The whispers that had followed their marriage started to change. Less speculation about scandal, more grudging acceptance that maybe, just maybe, the Duke had made a genuine choice. But it was Lily and Grace who sealed it. 6 weeks after the hearing, the girls asked if they could call Clara something other than Your Grace. Like what? Clara asked, her heart in her throat. Grace looked at Lily, who nodded encouragement. Like, Mama? Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. You don't have to. We want to, Lily interrupted. Our first Mama is gone. We'll never forget her, but you're here, and you're ours now too. Clara pulled both girls into her arms, crying too hard to speak. Over their heads, she saw Rowan standing in the doorway, his own eyes suspiciously bright. They were a family now, not the one anyone expected, not the one society would have chosen for them, but theirs. Spring came slowly to Blackmore House, thawing the frozen gardens and bringing color back to the gray landscape. Clara stood at the window of the drawing room, watching Lily and Grace play in the gardens below, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Behind her, she heard Rowan enter, felt his hand settle on her shoulders. They're happy, he said. They are. Because of you. Clara turned in his arms. Because of us. He smiled, kissed her forehead. I received a letter today from the Dowager. Your mother? What did she want? To invite us to London for the season. He paused. She wants to formally present you to society. Make it clear that you have the family's full support. Clara's stomach fluttered. That's a statement. It is. She's telling everyone that you're a Blackmore now, fully, completely. That anyone who questions you questions her. Why would she do that? Because you've proven yourself, and because she likes you, though she'd never admit it directly. Clara laughed despite herself. When does she want us? Next month. The opening ball of the season. Rowan's expression grew serious. Victor will be there. It's going to be a very public confrontation. Good. Let him see what he's up against. They arrived in London on a grey morning in April, the city already buzzing with the start of the social season. The Dowager had arranged for them to stay at the Blackmore Townhouse, a massive Georgian building in Mayfair that made even Blackmore House look modest. This is where I grew up, Rowan said as they entered the foyer. I haven't been back since Vivian died. Clara could see why. The house was full of ghosts, portraits of ancestors, furniture that hadn't changed in decades, the weight of generations pressing down. We don't have to stay here, she said. Yes, we do. Rowan squeezed her hand. It's time to stop running from the past. Time to build something new on top of it. The Dowager arrived that evening, sweeping in with her usual commanding presence. She looked Clara up and down, nodded once. You filled out, she said. Good. You were too thin before. Made you look weak. Thank you? Clara said uncertainly. Don't thank me, just don't embarrass me at the ball. The Dowager turned to Rowan. Victor's been spreading rumors again, saying the hearing was rigged, that you bribed witnesses. Let him talk. I intend to, but you need to be ready for pushback. He's got allies, people who still question your marriage. Then we'll prove them wrong, Clara said. The same way we've been doing. The Dowager smiled, sharp and approving. Good girl. The ball was 3 days away. Clara spent them in a state of controlled panic, preparing for what felt like a final exam. The Dowager drilled her on proper etiquette, on who was who in society, on the subtle hierarchies and alliances that governed aristocratic life. You're not a governess anymore, the Dowager said bluntly during one session. You're a duchess. Start acting like one. That means you don't apologize for existing. You don't shrink. You don't make yourself smaller to make others comfortable. What if they don't accept me? Then they can go straight to hell. The dowager's eyes glinted. But they will accept you, because I'm giving them no choice. The night of the ball arrived too quickly. Clara dressed in a new gown, emerald green silk that the dowager had commissioned, saying it made Clara look like royalty. Mary did her hair in an elaborate updo, wove pearls through it, fastened Vivian's necklace around her throat. When Clara looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked powerful, confident, every inch a duchess. "You look beautiful," Rowan said from the doorway. Clara turned. He was in formal evening dress, looking every bit the Duke's society expected, but his eyes were warm as they met hers, full of pride and something deeper. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." He offered his arm. "Then let's give them a show." The ballroom was packed when they arrived, hundreds of people in their finest clothes, all turning to watch as the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore were announced. Clara felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers start. Then she lifted her chin and walked in like she owned the place. The dowager was waiting, flanked by several other titled women Clara recognized as some of the most powerful matrons in society. They formed a phalanx around Clara, a clear signal she was under their protection. "Breathe," the dowager murmured, "and smile. You're a duchess, not a deer." Clara smiled, and across the room she saw Victor. He was watching her, his expression cold and calculating. When their eyes met, he raised his glass in a mocking salute. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The evening progressed like a carefully choreographed battle. The dowager paraded Clara around the ballroom, introducing her to everyone who mattered, making it clear through word and gesture that Clara had her full backing. Other women, ones Clara recognized as having been hostile before, now offered tentative smiles, careful compliments. The tide was turning. But Victor wasn't done. Halfway through the evening, he made his move. He cornered Rowan near the refreshment table, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Cousin, enjoying the evening?" "I was," Rowan said flatly. "I'm sure. Though I have to wonder, how long do you think this charade can last?" Victor's smile was sharp. "You can parade your governess around in silk and pearls, but she's still just a governess. Everyone knows it." Several heads turned. Clara felt her face flush, but she stayed where she was, the dowager's hand tight on her arm. "Actually," a new voice cut in, "she's the Duchess of Blackmore. Perhaps you should address her properly." Clara turned. Lady Pemberton stood there, the same woman who'd torn Clara apart over tea months ago, but her expression now was cool, disapproving, and aimed at Victor. "Lady Pemberton," Victor said, clearly not expecting the intervention. "Mr. Blackmore, I was just thinking how unfortunate it is when people don't know their place. Don't you agree?" The insult was subtle, but unmistakable. Victor's face went red. "I know my place perfectly well." "Do you? Because it seems to me you've been overstepping it for months now, questioning your betters, making accusations you can't prove, embarrassing yourself and your family." Lady Pemberton's voice was sweet as poison. "One might almost think you're bitter about something." Other women were gathering now, forming a circle around Clara. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to make it clear that the social winds had shifted. Victor had lost. He seemed to realize it too. His smile faltered, and for the first time, Clara saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of violence or ruin, but fear of something worse. Irrelevance. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and vicious. "Yes," the dowager said, stepping forward. "It is. You challenged my son's competence in Parliament and lost. You spread rumors and lies, and society rejected them. You've spent months trying to destroy this marriage, and all you've done is make it stronger." She leaned closer. "Walk away, Victor, before you lose what little dignity you have left." Victor stared at her, at Rowan, at Clara. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders rigid, defeat in every line of his body. The crowd around them erupted in whispers, but they were different now. Not scandalized, not shocked, just satisfied. The show was over, the villain had been vanquished. And Clara, the governess who wasn't supposed to belong, had won. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Clara danced with Rowan, with other titled gentlemen who suddenly wanted to curry favor, with the dowager's allies who welcomed her into their circle. She laughed and smiled and played the role of Duchess so well she almost forgot it had ever been a role at all. But the real moment came later, as the crowd was thinning and the music was winding down. Lady Pemberton approached Clara one last time. "Your Grace, a word?" They stepped aside, away from the crowd. Lady Pemberton studied Clara for a long moment. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. Clara blinked, surprised. "For what?" "For being part of the machine that tried to destroy you. For spreading rumors, for judging you without knowing you, for assuming you were less than you are." Lady Pemberton's expression was serious. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." "Why tell me this now?" "Because I watched you tonight. Watched how you handled Victor, how you carried yourself, how you've transformed this family." Lady Pemberton paused. "You're more of a duchess than half the women in this room who were born to it, and I wanted you to know that I see it." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just keep being exactly what you are." Lady Pemberton smiled. "And perhaps, if you're willing, we could start over. As friends this time." Clara extended her hand. "I'd like that." They shook, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Not triumph, exactly, but something close. Acceptance. Belonging. She'd fought for her place in this world, and she'd won it. The journey back to Blackmore House took 2 days, but it felt like coming home in a way London never had. The countryside rolled past, green and fresh with spring, and Clara watched it with a sense of peace she'd never expected to feel. "Penny for your thoughts," Rowan said. Clara smiled. "Just thinking about how far we've come." "We have, haven't we? Do you ever regret it? Marrying me?" Rowan turned to face her fully. "Not for a single second. Do you?" Clara thought about the scared governess she'd been, facing ruin and desperate for any escape. Thought about the woman she'd become, stronger, braver, more certain of who she was and what she deserved. "No," she said. "I don't regret it at all." When they arrived at Blackmore House, Lily and Grace were waiting on the front steps, practically vibrating with excitement. "How was it?" Lily demanded as soon as Clara stepped out of the carriage. "Did you dance? Did people stare? Did you show them all how amazing you are?" Clara laughed, swept both girls into her arms. "It was fine, long, full of too many people." "Did you win?" Grace asked seriously. Clara met Rowan's eyes over the girls' heads. "Yes, sweetheart. We won." That night, Clara stood at the window of their shared bedroom, not hers, not his, but theirs, looking out at the gardens bathed in moonlight. Behind her, she heard Rowan enter, felt him cross the room. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "About how none of this was supposed to happen. We were supposed to be strangers playing roles, a transaction, nothing more. And instead? Instead, we became a family, built something real out of something false." Clara leaned back against him. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong." "It might," Rowan said honestly. "Victor might try again. Society might turn on us. Life might throw something unexpected at us. That's not very comforting." "No, but it's true." He turned her to face him. "The difference is, we'll face it together. Whatever comes. We're not alone anymore." Clara looked at him. This man who'd started as a stranger, become an ally, transformed into a partner and now something even deeper, and felt her heart swell. "I love you," she said. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and real. Rowan's expression softened. "I know. I've known for weeks. I was just waiting for you to admit it." "And, do you love you?" He smiled. "Clara, I started falling for you the moment you refused to be intimidated by my study. I was just too stubborn to admit it." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And Clara kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, the love and the gratitude and the sheer wonder that this cold marriage of convenience had become the warmest thing in her life. When they finally broke apart, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For refusing to give up, for fighting when it would have been easier to run, For making me want to be better. His voice cracked. For saving me. Clara cupped his face in her hands. We saved each other. The months that followed were not perfect. There were still challenges. Victor made one more feeble attempt to question the marriage before finally retreating into bitter silence. Some members of society never fully accepted Clara. The household still had its tensions and conflicts. But Clara faced them all with the same fierce determination she'd brought to everything else. And she didn't face them alone. Rowan stood beside her, a true partner now. The girls flourished, growing confident and happy in a house that finally felt like a home instead of a mausoleum. The dowager became an unexpected ally and friend, visiting often and taking obvious pride in how Clara had transformed the family. And slowly, quietly, Clara built a life she'd never imagined possible. She started a school on the estate for tenant children, teaching them herself when she could. She renovated parts of Blackmore House that hadn't been touched in decades, bringing light and warmth into spaces that had been dark for too long. She hosted gatherings that became known for their genuine warmth rather than stiff formality. She became, in every way that mattered, the Duchess of Blackmore. 1 year after the Parliament hearing, Clara stood in the same drawing room where she'd once sat alone at breakfast, feeling like an intruder. Now it was filled with people. Rowan working at his desk, Lily curled up with a book, Grace playing with her dolls on the floor. Her family. Clara? Rowan looked up from his work. You're smiling. I was just thinking, she said, about how strange life is. How so? A year ago, I was drowning, facing ruin, certain I'd lost everything. She crossed to him, perched on the arm of his chair. And now I have everything I never knew I wanted. Rowan pulled her into his lap, ignoring the girl's giggles. Do you ever miss it? Your old life? Clara thought about the narrow room, the constant worry, the feeling of being invisible and powerless. Not even a little bit, she said. Good. He kissed her softly. Because I'm not letting you go. Ugh, they're kissing again, Lily announced. Gross, Grace agreed, but she was smiling. Clara laughed, stood up, crossed to where the girls were playing. All right, you two, time to get ready for dinner. Can we eat in the dining room tonight? Grace asked. All together, like a real family? Clara felt her throat tighten. We are a real family, sweetheart. But yes, we can eat in the dining room. As the girls ran off, chattering excitedly, Rowan came to stand beside Clara. You did that, he said quietly. Made them feel safe enough to be children again. We did that. No, you. Before you came, this house was a tomb. Now it's alive. He took her hand. You changed everything, Clara. Not by being perfect, just by refusing to give up. That night, after dinner, after the girls were in bed, after the house had settled into quiet, Clara stood in the library, the same room where she'd once hunted for evidence of theft, where she'd fought to prove herself worthy. She'd come so far from that scared governess, and she'd done it by refusing to be less than she was, by fighting for her place in a world designed to reject her, by choosing to build something real out of desperation and necessity. Rowan found her there, reading by firelight. Come to bed, he said. In a minute. He crossed to her, took the book from her hands, pulled her to her feet. Clara Blackmore, Duchess, partner, mother, the woman who saved my life and gave me back my family. He smiled. I love you. I love you too. They walked upstairs together, hand in hand, to the bedroom they now shared every night. And as Clara settled into bed beside the man who'd started as a stranger and become her everything, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been smooth. It had been messy and terrifying and full of moments where failure seemed certain, but they'd survived. They'd fought, and they'd won. Not because they were perfect, not because love conquered all in some fairy tale way, but because they chose each other every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming against the windows. Inside, the house was warm and safe and filled with the quiet sounds of a family at peace. Clara closed her eyes, Rowan's arms around her, and felt something she'd never felt before in her entire life. Complete. The governess, who'd had nothing, had become the Duchess, who had everything. And she'd earned every single moment of it. Years later, when people asked Clara how she'd done it, how a poor governess had married a duke and not just survived but thrived, she always gave the same answer. I refused to disappear. It was that simple, that hard. She'd walked into a world designed to crush women like her, and instead of breaking, she'd adapted. She'd learned. She'd fought. She'd become exactly what that world said she couldn't be. And in doing so, she'd changed it. The scandal sheets eventually moved on to other stories. Victor faded into obscurity, bitter but beaten. Society adjusted to Clara's presence, then embraced it, then forgot she'd ever been anything but a duchess. But Clara never forgot. She never forgot the fear of that first day at Blackmore House, the shame of being judged and found wanting, the terror of facing Parliament, the slow, hard work of earning respect. She carried those memories with her, used them to fuel the changes she made. The school she founded grew, educating hundreds of children who otherwise would have had nothing. The reform she pushed for in how estates treated their workers became a model others copied. The family she built with Rowan became known not for scandal or drama, but for genuine warmth and partnership. She took the pain of her own experience and transformed it into purpose. And when Lily came to her years later, nervous about her own debut into society, Clara sat her down and told her the truth. "They're going to judge you," Clara said. "They're going to whisper and speculate and try to find ways to tear you down. That's what people do when they're scared of change." "How did you survive it?" Lily asked. "By remembering that their opinion of me didn't change who I was. I was still Clara, still worthy, still deserving of respect." She squeezed her daughter's hand. "You are a Blackmore. You are smart and strong and capable. And anyone who says otherwise is wrong." Lily hugged her fiercely. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart." The seasons turned, years passed. Grace grew into a confident young woman who wanted to be a doctor, shocking society all over again. Lily became a patron of the arts, using her position to support artists society had overlooked. Rowan grew older, softer, happier than Clara had ever seen him. And Clara herself transformed from the scared governess into a formidable duchess, then into something even more, a force for change, a voice for the voiceless, a woman who refused to accept that the world couldn't be better. She never stopped fighting. She never stopped believing that people deserved more than the narrow boxes society tried to force them into. And she never, ever apologized for taking up space. On a spring morning, 20 years after that first terrifying wedding, Clara stood in the gardens of Blackmore House, watching her grandchildren play. Lily's daughter, Grace's son, running through the flowers with the same wild joy the girls themselves had once shown. Rowan came to stand beside her, his hair fully gray now, lines etched deep around his eyes. But when he looked at her, his expression was the same as it had been on that night in his study, when everything changed. Love, gratitude, wonder that she was his. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. The same question he'd asked years ago. "Saying yes to a desperate duke?" Clara smiled, took his hand. "Not for a single second." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. They made us who we are." Rowan pulled her close, kissed her temple. "I'm glad you refused to disappear, Clara Blackmore." "So am I." They stood there together as the sun rose higher, warming the gardens, bringing life to everything it touched. Two people who'd started as strangers, bound by necessity, who'd built something extraordinary out of desperation. A marriage, a family, a legacy. And as Clara watched her grandchildren laugh and play in the home she'd fought so hard to claim, she knew with absolute certainty that every moment of struggle had been worth it. Because she'd survived, she'd fought, she'd won, and she'd done it her way. The governess who became a duchess, the nobody who became somebody, the woman who refused to disappear, and in refusing, changed everything.